Did you know that kinky wellness is integral to your self-development? Hi, welcome to The Partition, home of kinky wellness, the ultimate destination to explore the integral connection between kinky wellness and your personal development. I'm your host and kinky wellness coach, Dana Sugar, and I'm here to show why kinky sexual wellness deserves a rightful spot within the wellness conversation. Don't forget to join me each Monday as I bring on a special guest to dive into specific aspects of kinky wellness. So let's strip away the shame and taboo together and have an open conversation about it. Hey, welcome back. Today is a good old-fashioned rant. And in today's rant, it's all about why is it when it comes to BDSM and kink, only the extreme side seems to get their voices heard. And I mean this, truly. I know a ton of sexual wellness educators who are incredibly knowledgeable, professional, and passionate about what they do, and yet they face constant pushback, censorship, and even outright silencing. So I can't help but ask, why is it that the person dressed up in a dog costume barking at kids on TikTok gets more visibility and even legitimacy in the kink community than someone who actually knows what they're talking about? I know I've talked about censorship before, and yes, I vent about it a bunch, but I'm still left with the frustrating feeling of why does the extreme side or fringe side of things so often get the loudest mic? As much as I believe every adult has the right to make whatever choices they want behind closed doors, so long as it's consensual and healthy, I do also believe in good choices and bad choices. Now, that might sound harsh to some, but hear me out. Take, for example, the guy in the dog costume. There's a difference between tapping into your animalistic side and exploring your primal kink and playing with sounds and movements and fantasies and actually believing that you are, in fact, a fucking dog. That's where I start to draw the line. Is it healthy for someone to lose touch with reality to the point that they act out an entire identity as a non-human being? No, I don't think that's healthy at all. I'm all for fantasy and role plays within boundaries that are safe, consensual, and most importantly, grounded in some sort of reality. It's one thing to indulge in an animalistic or primal role, to enjoy those types of expression as a way of releasing tension or exploring different sides of yourself. But when the lines begin to blur to the point that someone starts believing that they are in fact an animal and starts living as such, that crosses into something, in my opinion, for major concern. I mean, even talking about it now, it's a tricky balance. On one hand, I want to fight for a world where kinks and fantasies and lifestyles can be explored without shame or judgment. But on the other hand, we also need to recognize that not all choices are equally healthy, even in the world of kink. Some behaviors, no matter how well-intentioned, can be harmful even if they are consensual among adults. So again, why is it that the most extreme, bizarre, or sensationalized forms of kink seem to dominate public spaces? And why are the voices of actual sexual wellness educators, those with knowledge, experience, and true understanding of healthy dynamics, drowned out or silenced? Is it because it's easier to profit off shock value? I definitely think so. Is it because society likes to keep things in extremes rather than the nuanced, often messy middle ground where real, healthy discussions live? I also think the answer to this is yes. But here's the thing. The guy barking at kids in public or any other kind of highly sensationalized behavior actually reinforces the very stigmas that the kink community has been fighting against for years. Because let's face it, the average person who is either unfamiliar with or who has little to no exposure to kink are scared of that kind of behavior. And honestly, it's not just because it's out of the ordinary, but because it's deeply alienating to the understanding of what's normal or acceptable. The barking guy acting out animalistic behavior in a public space triggers all kinds of discomfort and fear. And why wouldn't it? It's a literal breakdown of societal norms. It challenges people's sense of what's real and what's acceptable in public spaces, and even more so, it challenges their understanding of human nature. To the average person, this sort of behavior isn't just normal, it actually seems dangerous and delusional. And when someone like this insists it's healthy or normal, it's hard for most people to buy into that. It's hard for them to believe it's anything other than a sign of mental illness or deviation from reality. And to clarify, I'm not saying that everyone who engages in extreme forms of kink or role play has a mental health issue. But the way these extreme behaviors are portrayed in public and on social media can create that very, 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 very sane perception. When you have someone out there on TikTok or in the media portraying their kink as an identity and not just as a play or as a fantasy, it doesn't help normalize or legitimize kink. Instead, it feeds into the cultural narrative that kink is inherently pathological or deviant or simply a matter of being broken. And that's just not frustrating for those of us who practice healthy and consensual kink. It actually undermines the work of educators, therapists, advocates who are trying to show that kink can be a healthy part of a well-adjusted sexual identity when approached with care, mutual respect, and consent. Again, the average person is afraid of the guy barking because he reinforces the stereotype that all kink is extreme and dangerous. Understand that it's very hard to separate out the healthy, consensual, and well-informed parts of kink when those extreme outliers are given more visibility. In fact, people are far more likely to associate any kink with weirdness, violence, or unhealthy behavior because that's what they see being represented in the media. They don't hear from educators or communities that are practicing kink in ways that are safe, emotionally enriching, and empowering. Instead, they hear about someone who genuinely believes they are a dog, or they see shock-focused performances, and those are the moments that get amplified because they are inherently more eye-catching and, again, more shocking. This is exactly why I believe the voices of educated, thoughtful, moderate kink practitioners are so important, and why they often get drowned out. Society loves to push things into the categories of either normal or deviant, and the loudest, most extreme behaviors are easier to digest when they fit the narrative of kink as inherently other. The moment we start complicating things and talking about the nuances of healthy kink, that is where things get uncomfortable for most people, because it's harder to box into an easy narrative. So when the barking dog guy says, "This is healthy," the general public can't look past the performance, the shock value, the complete departure from everyday reality. The average person is not in the place where they understand the subtleties of kink. They don't have the language or the context to see the difference between healthy consensual role-playing and someone who might be acting out something harmful or self-destructive, and that's why they dismiss it. But the truth is, most kink is not like that. The majority of people in BDSM and kink communities engage in a form of play, exploration, release, or even a tool for intimacy and connection with a partner. The vast majority of us don't feel the need to dress up as an animal and bark in public places to express our sexuality or gain views, likes, or our 15 minutes of fame. We don't need to engage in extreme performances to find meaning in our kinks. But because the extreme behaviors are what gets visibility, the more nuanced, grounded, and thoughtful conversations are drowned out. And that's a real problem because it perpetuates fear, misunderstanding, and even harmful judgments about what kink is and what it can be. It reinforces the stigma that all kink is weird, unhealthy, or deviant. And the average person will likely hold on to those stereotypes because they have nothing else to balance it out with. If we want to see a more accurate representation of kink, one that reflects the actual diversity of health of the community, we need to shift the narrative. We need to amplify the voices of those who are talking about kink in a responsible, educated way. We need to make space for those who are promoting safety and consent and emotional well-being without sensationalization or romanticizing the extreme behaviors that only serve to reinforce the stigma. Because at the end of the day, the more extreme portrayals of kink only hurt the cause. They make it harder for the general public to understand that kink is about personal empowerment, sexual exploration, and healthy relationships when done responsibly. Now, my next point might also be triggering for some, but I feel like I shouldn't have to wave a pride flag all over my information just to get past censorship. Because as many as you know, last year I faced a lot more censorship issues than I do currently right now. But as I navigate those censorship battles, I started reaching out to others in the community, looking for advice on how I could work around it and how I could share my content and do the work I care about without constantly being shut down. And honestly, in this political landscape, I should have known what I was about to learn. Because one of the things that I learned that there's this underlying expectation in some parts of the community that if you want to stay visible and avoid being censored, you almost have to align yourself with certain identities or groups. And I'm not saying that I'm against certain identities or groups. People can marry and do whatever they want. But here's the thing. Sexual wellness is not just for one specific community. It's for everyone. It's for all people of all identities, all orientation, all backgrounds, not just for the LGBT community. Sexual health and education aren't exclusive to any one community. And the moment you start framing sex as something only for LGBTQ plus people or for any other group for that matter, you risk excluding the vast majority of individuals who fall under that umbrella. Also, there's this strange notion that unless you specifically cater or center that identity, you're not doing it right. And that, in my view, creates more division than it does inclusivity. Again, seriously, I shouldn't, nor will I ever, just put a rainbow flag all over my stuff just to avoid being censored. Isn't that what people complain about, when Coca-Cola slaps on their pride flag during that month? I don't feel like we should have to do that as well as smaller educators. I shouldn't have to mold my message to fit into a specific box in order to get visibility and respect Kinky Wellness deserves. Sex education and wellness should be about everyone. It's not about picking sides. And we really need to get past this idea that sexual wellness can only belong to one particular group. Sex is universal, and it is for all of us. And I get it. Some people might be listening right now and thinking, but we've been oppressed. We need our voices heard. And I hear that. I really do. I get the importance of representation, especially for communities that have historically been marginalized, silenced, or pushed to the edges of society. I get it. But honestly, after seeing some of the things popping up on TikTok lately, I'm not really sure I agree with this notion anymore. Look, I'm not here to dismiss the struggle or invalidate anyone's experience. I fully understand why visibility and representation are crucial for people who have been made to feel invisible for so long. But I also think we need to be careful about what kind of voices we're amplifying in the process. Because after all, not all visibility is good visibility. If anything, I've been more and more convinced that the push to center these narrow, often sensationalized narratives about kink and BDSM on platforms like TikTok is actually doing more harm than good. Just because someone is loud and visible doesn't mean that they're representing the entire spectrum of the kink experience. And quite frankly, I sure as hell don't think we should be reinforcing the idea that sexual wellness needs to be vulgar, extreme, or some sort of circus just to be discussed. Kink, BDSM, and alternative sexualities don't have to be shocking or grotesque to be real or meaningful. Sex also doesn't need to be this big spectacle to be valid either. We don't need to turn it into something that's more about performance than about actual connection or personal exploration. Kink can be safe, it can be fun, and it can be healthy without being sensationalized. We don't need to be reduced to the most extreme examples of kink or BDSM for people to take it seriously. So while I understand the need for marginalized communities to have their voices heard, and I stand with that effort, I don't think that means that we need to embrace any narrative that comes with it, especially when those narratives don't align with the broader, more inclusive, and healthier realities of kink and sexual wellness. We can raise awareness, we can fight for visibility, and we can do that in a way that actually reflects the complexities, respect, and safety that are at the core of healthy kink and BDSM communities. Now, that might be a lot for some to hear, but really my goal is to move the conversation of kink and BDSM and overall kinky wellness forward by embracing a more thoughtful, more mature, and more respectful approach to sexuality that doesn't rely on shock value to make an impact. If you agree with me, or maybe if you don't, please let me know in the comments. But that's all I have for today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Sending lots of love. I'll chat with you next week, and as always, stay kinky. P.S. If you're interested in learning more about how kinky wellness is the evolution of sexual health and healing, be sure to visit www.kinkywellness.ca, where you can pick up your very own copy of the Kinky Wellness textbook and discover how kinky wellness is a healthy outlet for aggression, imagination, and attention.